Can you raise your right hand while touching your nose with your left hand?
Sam Altman made an appearance at the AI for Good conference, and he talked about a bunch of different topics, including what's coming next, AGI, AI safety, and we're going to watch it together. So let's get into it.
Hello, Sam. How are you? Thanks for hanging with us. Just so you know, you are speaking to a fully packed house, and you are following a princess.
I saw that.
Welcome.
Very honored.
We're in this interesting moment in AI where everybody is aware of the power and the potential, but it hasn't really changed the world yet. It hasn't really changed any of the SDGs and the things we're talking about. What is the first big good thing we'll see happen? And what is the first big bad thing we'll see happen?
So I think the area where we're seeing impact even now is productivity. Software developers are the most commonly cited example, and I think probably still the best one to use, where people can just do their work much faster, more effectively, work more on the parts that they want. And like other sort of technological tools, they become part of a workflow, and then it's pretty quickly becomes difficult to imagine working without them. And so I expect that pattern to happen in more areas where we'll see different industries become much more productive than they used to be because they can use these tools, and that'll sort of have a positive impact on everything from writing code to how we teach, how we learn, how healthcare works, and it'll see this increase in efficiency. And I think that'll be the first really detectable positive thing, and I'd say we're already in that.
All right, so completely agree. Ever since the release of GitHub Copilot, which was really the first production scale AI assistant, ever since that release, coding has really changed forever. I adopted it pretty early, and with the ability to just hit tab to autocomplete large sections of my coding productivity has skyrocketed. Now with ChatGPT plus a bunch of other AI coding assistants, I am just so much more productive, and as he said, my workflow is completely different. I rarely write code from scratch anymore. I typically go to ChatGPT, ask it to write me something, put it into VS Code, edit it where I need it, and then add to it as necessary. And that is one of the biggest value use cases today.
First negative thing, I mean, obviously there are already some negative things happening with the tools. I would say cybersecurity, I don't know if it'll be the first, but it's one that I want to call particular attention to, is something that I think could be quite a problem.
So he talks about cybersecurity, but in my mind, the biggest potential downside to AI today in the short term is going to be people getting scammed. The ability to create content, phishing content, or just scammy content in general at scale is really tremendous. And if you've seen GPT-4o with its very realistic voice capabilities, imagine that calling your parent and convincing them to hand over their credit card or social security information. Or if someone is able to clone your voice and then call your parents or call your coworker, call your employer and get information about you, or just convince you. I mean, the possibilities are really endless. And this kind of stuff has been around, but what is different now is the fact that it can be done at such large scale and with incredible quality and accuracy. That is the scariest big negative thing that's happening in AI today to me.
Let me ask you a little bit about the new model you're training. You've just announced that you have begun training the next iteration, whether it's GPT-5 or whatever you're going to call it. One of the big concerns in this room in Geneva is that GPT-4 and the other large language models are much better at English, Spanish, French than they are at, say, Swahili. How important to you is that? How important is language equity as you train the next big iteration of your product?
I don't know if that was a tee up or not, but I'll take it. One of the things that we're really pleased with GPT-4o, which we released a couple of weeks ago, is that it is very good at a much, much wider variety of languages. We'll make future ones better at even more, but I think the stat that we announced was like a good coverage for 97% of people for their primary language that they speak. So we were able to make a really big step forward there. People have been loving that. and we'll continue to push on that further.
Yeah, this is great news. Everybody getting access to AI in their native language will just help them utilize the value of AI even more. And if AI is able to output in a variety of different languages, then all of that can also be used as future training data to further increase the quality of these large language models in different languages.
As you train this next iteration, let's stick with the next iteration of the model. As you train it, what level of improvement do you think we're likely to see? Are we likely to see kind of a linear improvement, or are we likely to see asymptotic improvement, or are we likely to see any kind of exponential, very surprising improvement?
We don't expect that we're near an asymptote, but this is like a debate in the world, and I think the best thing for us to do is just show, not tell.
All right, and just for those of you who are wondering what an asymptote means and what it means in this context, it means we're approaching diminishing returns. So as this curve, if you imagine if it were the inverse, it's approaching this asymptote line B right here, and quality is improving, and then all of a sudden you start to see the curve flatten out, and that's when quality is also going to flatten out. And so what he's saying is we're not at that point yet, and there's still a lot of headroom, and he has said this on multiple occasions, between new technologies, new innovations, new training sets, bigger models. I tend to agree. There's still a lot of headroom for improvement in these models.
There's a lot of people making a lot of predictions, and I think what we'll try to do is just do the best research we can, and then figure out how to responsibly release whatever we're able to create. I expect that it'll be hugely better in some areas and surprisingly not as much better in others, which has been the case with every previous model.
That's really interesting. Hugely better in some areas and not so much better in others. What do you think those hugely better areas are going to be? And what do you think the not so better areas are going to be? Let me know in the comments below. In my mind, I believe these models are going to continue to get a lot better at coding, because there's just a tremendous amount of code, and the amount of code being written is increasing substantially. I think planning, logic, reasoning, these things are going to get better, but not as quickly as other things. And so specifically around planning, which we all know the transformer architecture kind of doesn't really work well for right now, at least. And having this world model is another thing that I don't think it's going to get better at really quickly.
This feels like the conversation we've had every other model release. When we were going from 3 to 3.5 and 3.5 to 4, there's a lot of debate about, well, is it really going to be that much better? If so, in what ways? And the answer is there still seems to be a lot of headroom. And I expect that we will make progress on some things that people didn't expect to be possible on the whole.
Though this is also the first time you're going to have a model that will be trained in large part on synthetic data. I presume, because the web now contains lots of synthetic data, meaning data that was created by other large language models. How worried are you that training a large language model on data created by large language models will lead to corruption of the system?
I think what you need is high quality data. There is low quality synthetic data, there's low quality human data, and as long as we can find enough quality data to train our models, or another thing is ways to train, get better at data efficiency and learn more from smaller amounts of data, or any number of other techniques, I think that's okay. And I'd say we feel like we have what we need for this next model.
All right, he said a lot right there. So first, he didn't necessarily confirm or deny that GPT-5 is going to have a lot of synthetic data, not so much synthetic data. Are they creating their own synthetic data? Probably they are. So if GPT-5 is going to be trained on synthetic data, he kind of said it has to be high quality synthetic data. But if it is synthetic data, it's going to be based on everything that these models have already been trained on. That's what synthetic data means. It's going to be produced by GPT-4 to train GPT-5. And it's hard for me to imagine a world in which this data is new or different enough for it to train a model in a really different way than GPT-4. And we've seen that with a lot of our tests. As we do the same tests over different models, we kind of start to see this pattern in output. We never get some amazing new output that really blows our mind. It's more like, yeah, we've seen that kind of output before. But then he also talked about maybe you don't actually need a ton more data. And I think that's a really interesting approach. If you have new techniques and new algorithmic innovations, maybe you can actually train a model to be much higher quality with much less data. And here's the thing, all the data on the internet, all the human produced data is pretty much already done, right? They've all been used for this model, for other models. All of the open source models are trained on all of the same data as GPT-4. Now, unique human produced data sets are becoming increasingly more valuable by the day. OpenAI almost weekly is announcing partnerships with publications, with data companies. Just a couple weeks ago, they announced a major partnership with Reddit, which has a tremendous amount of high quality and low quality user data. And then when you look at xAI or Grok, G-R-O-K, Grok, Elon Musk's AI company, they have Twitter's data, which is just a treasure trove of incredible, diverse data that they can use to train their models. So these data sets are going to increase in value even more as time passes. Now, OpenAI does not have their own data set. They have to partner, they have to acquire. xAI does. Meta does with Facebook. Microsoft kinda does. Google definitely does, right? So all of these really unique data sets are going to be valuable and allow models to stand apart from the others in the field.
Have you created massive amounts of synthetic data to train your model on? Have you self-generated data for training?
We of course have done all sorts of experiments, including generating lots of synthetic data. You know, there'd be something like very strange if the best way to train a model was to just generate like a quadrillion tokens of synthetic data and feed that back in. You'd say that like somehow that seems inefficient, and there ought to be something where you can just learn more from the data as you're training.
Very interesting. And intuitively, it kind of makes sense. Rather than an existing model just outputting a bunch of new data, just massive amounts of data that, again, are derivative of the data it's been trained on, why not figure out better ways to learn more from the existing data? And maybe there are ways to do that. And he's kind of hinting at that. He never actually says anything directly like, yes, this is going to work. He always says, well, we've tried this, we've tried that. So, you know, take it all with a grain of salt. But that's what I think he's getting at here.
You know, I think we still have a lot to figure out. But yeah, of course, we've generated lots of synthetic data to experiment training on that. But again, I think the core of what you're asking is how can you learn more from less data?
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Well, let's talk about one of, I think, the key questions that will affect how these things go out in the world. Last year, you did this fascinating interview with Patrick Collison, the founder of Stripe. And he asked this great question. He said, is there anything that could change in AI that would make you much less concerned that AI will have dramatic bad effects in the world? And you said, well, if we could understand what exactly is happening behind the scenes, if we could understand what is happening with one neuron. And if I understand that, it means like you want the AI model to be able to teach someone chemistry, but you don't want them to be able to teach them to make a chemical weapon. And you wish that you could do that in the guts, not at just the interface level. Is that the right way to think about it? And have you solved this problem?
I think that safety is going to require like a whole package approach. But this question of interpretability does seem like a useful thing to understand. And there's many levels at which that could work. We certainly have not solved interpretability.
So I want to pause there for a second. And interpretability basically means, can you understand why a model has output what it has? Basically, once you put in a prompt, it is a black box for the most part. Then at the end of that black box, you get the output. And a lot of people are working on this. In fact, let me show you something. So Claude actually put out a paper about a week and a half ago about this exact topic. And the title of the blog post is Golden Gate Claude. And in fact, I meant to do a full video on this, and I still may. Let me know in the comments if you want to see this. So just a little bit about what the paper is. On Tuesday, we released a major new research paper on interpreting large language models, in which we began to map out the inner workings of our AI model, Claude 3 Sonnet. In the mind of Claude, we found millions of concepts that activate when the model reads relevant text or sees relevant images, which we call features. One of those was the concept of the Golden Gate Bridge. We found that there's a specific combination of neurons in Claude's neural network that activates when it encounters a mention or a picture of this most famous San Francisco landmark. Not only can we identify these features, we can tune the strength of their activation up or down and identify corresponding changes in Claude's behavior. And so what they basically did was they tuned up a model to reference the Golden Gate Bridge whenever possible. So if you asked it, hey, what is a cool idea for a date night? It would say, well, why don't you go and look at the Golden Gate Bridge? And all of the answers would kind of come back to the Golden Gate Bridge. So there is a way to see inside the black box, and they're starting to publish new ways to do that, which I find to be really interesting. Do you think the semiconductor industry is just about chips? It's actually a lot more fascinating than that. Let me break it down for you. And we're going to be talking about ASM, who is sponsoring this part of the video today. So ASM has been around since the 60s. ASM has been making the equipment that helps build the chips that are found within your phone, your tablets, your computers, basically anything that turns on. And ASM's technology is the driving force behind everything that you use every day. So when you pick up your phone and you take a picture, you're not thinking about how it works. It just works. But it's all powered by semiconductors. And the magic behind these tiny powerhouses is not just the chips themselves, but also the machinery that builds the chips. This is some of the most sophisticated, cutting-edge technology and science in the world. And that's exactly what ASM does. Our everyday tech essentials simply wouldn't be possible without the chips, and the chips wouldn't be possible without the machinery by ASM to actually build them. And those machines wouldn't be possible without the brilliant people at ASM building them. And the teams at ASM are working hard to build the future of artificial intelligence at every layer of the stack. ASM is much more than just a tech company. It is the brains of each individual on each team within the company of ASM. They are quite truly building the future. So big shout out to ASM, and thank you for partnering with me on this video. So to learn more about ASM and potentially even work there, check out the link in the description below. It's a great company. So now back to the video.
There's a number of things going on I'm very excited about, but nothing close to where I would say, yeah, everybody can go home. We've got this figured out. It does seem to me that the more we can understand what's happening in these models, the better. And I think that can be part of this cohesive package to how we can make and verify safety claims.
So the interviewer asked about the interpretability of models within the context of safety. And Sam actually answered it not within the context of safety, but then kind of finished within that context of safety. But I think it's much more than just safety. And of course, the safety is important because then you can tune the model to say no to certain things, yes to other things, whether you agree with that or not. That's what you could do. But there's a lot more to it than just safety. And understanding what's going on inside the model is going to give us insight into how to vastly improve the model. Let's keep watching.
You don't understand what's happening, isn't that an argument to not keep releasing new, more powerful models?
Well, we don't understand what's happening in your brain at a neuron by neuron level. And yet we know you can follow some rules, and we can ask you to explain why you think something. There are other ways to understand a system besides understanding it at the sort of neuron by neuron level.
I find that to be really interesting. He basically said, if you don't understand what's going on, why do you keep iterating and releasing new models? Isn't that a reason not to? And Sam says, well, as humans, we don't understand every single neuron, what is happening, how the brain works, but we kind of understand that if we put out a set of rules and we have this framework to work within, you're going to behave in a certain way. So again, I think it's really interesting that you don't necessarily need to understand every single neuron within the human brain or within a model to actually understand how the model is going to behave.
The characteristics, the behavior of these systems is extremely well characterized. And one of the things I think that has surprised a lot of people in the field, including me, is the degree to which we have been able to get very quickly, and sort of when viewed on the history of a new technology scale, these systems to be generally considered safe and robust.
My wife also says she sometimes doesn't understand exactly what's happening at a deep level of my brain. So we've got that in common there. What is the most progress we've made, or have there been any real breakthroughs in understanding this question of interpretability?
There was a great release recently from Anthropic that did a golden...
There it is. It's so funny. So obviously, I haven't watched this video yet. We're watching it together, and there he's referencing that paper that I just showed you.
Gate bridge model that sort of showed off, one interesting feature of this. That'd be like a recent thing I would point to.
Okay. Well, let me go to a proposal that Tristan Harris made this morning as we're talking about safety. Tristan was on this stage. And he said that For every $1 million that a large language model company puts into making their models more powerful, they should also put $1 million into safety. 1 for 1. Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't know what that means. I think there's this temptation to break the world into capabilities here and safety here. And you can like make all of these nice sounding, we should have this policy and that policy. But if you look at the work we've done to actually make a model like GPT-4, used by hundreds of millions of people for increasingly frequent, important, valuable tasks, if you look at making that thing safe, you'd have a hard time characterizing where a lot of the work would fit. Because if you're using a model in production, you want it to like accomplish your task and not go do something that's going to have a negative effect of some sort. But you don't know, like you as a user, you're like, oh, did this work because it did what I want? Did that work because of capabilities work or safety work or something in between? Like getting the model to behave the way the user wants according to these boundaries, it's an integrated thing. It's like you get on an airplane. I guess this is a bad recent example, but I started it, so I'll stick with it.
But
you get on an airplane and you want to know it'll get you where you want to go, and you also want to know that it's not going to crash on the way. But I think there are some cases in that airplane design where you could say, okay, this was clearly capabilities work, and this was clearly safety work. But on the whole, you're trying to design this integrated system that is going to safely get you where you want to go, hopefully quickly, and hopefully not have a panel fall off during flight.
All right. So the interviewer's question of if you're spending $1 million to innovate on a model, you should also spend $1 million on the safety of the model. Sam's answer was a lot of nonsense, to be honest. It was kind of running around the actual question. He said he didn't understand it. It was pretty clear what he's saying. When Jan, one of the head AI safety researchers at OpenAI who just left, when he left, he basically said, my team was promised 20% of our compute. And Sam was not delivering on that, the 20% of the compute to help with safety research. And he wasn't getting it. That's really what he meant. I don't understand why Sam didn't understand it. And what the whole $1 million for innovation versus $1 million for safety is half and half. Half of the compute for innovation, half of the compute for safety research. It's not difficult to understand, but Sam did not want to answer that question, I can see.
And the boundary there is sort of not as clear as it often seems.
Fair enough. So in some ways, all of your engineers, to a degree, are working on safety. But let me pose it a different way.
I almost said safety is everybody's responsibility, but that seemed like the worst of those corporate slogan things, so I didn't.
Right. So one of the reasons why this is on my mind, of course, is that the co-founder who's most associated with safety, Ilya, just left. Jan, who's one of the lead workers on safety, left and went to go work at Anthropic and tweeted that the company's not prioritizing. So convince.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. He is literally calling out what just happened, and Sam was dancing around it. So let's see if he's going to answer it more directly now.
Everybody here that they're not, and you're flying this, we're all on your airplane right now, Sam. Convince us that the wing's not going to fall off after these folks have left.
I think you have to look at our actions and the models that we've released and the work we have done, the science we have done to make. Again, I made this point earlier, but if you go back and look at what people were saying at sort of the GPT-3 time about the plausibility of us ever make systems like this safe, aligned, whatever, and the fact that just a small number of years later we've put something out at this standard, and this is a huge amount of work across many teams. There's alignment research, there's safety system, there's monitoring. We just recently talked about some of our work to take down a bunch of influence operations. The fact that we are able to deliver this, and of course we're not perfect, of course we learn from contact with reality as we go, but the fact that we are able to deliver on this at the level we do, I think is, it's something we're very proud of. I also think that taking the super alignment teams and putting them closer for the reason I was talking about earlier, putting them closer to the teams that are doing some of the research will be a very positive development.
Yeah, he really did not talk about it at all.
If I worked at OpenAI, I'd probably knock on your door and say, Sam, I want a short meeting. And I would come and I would say, I understand why AGI has been such a focus, right? It has been the thing that everybody in AI wants to build. It has been part of science fiction. You know, building a machine that thinks like a human means we're building a machine like the most capable creation that we have on Earth. But I would be very concerned because a lot of the problems with AI, a lot of the bad things with AI seem to come from its ability to impersonate a human, right? You talked earlier about cybersecurity. A lot of the problems we're seeing are that it's so easy for somebody to impersonate a human. And I feel like there have been a lot of decisions at OpenAI to make the machine more like a human, right? The way the typing kind of feels like a human. Sometimes the machine uses the first person singular. The voice question, which we'll get to, where it sounds very human. Why do you keep making machines that seem more like humans instead of saying, you know what, understand the risks, we're going to kind of change directions here?
I think it's important to design human-compatible systems, but I think it is a mistake to assume that they are human-like in their thinking or capabilities or limitations, even though we sort of train them off of, we do this behavioral cloning off of all of this human text data. They clearly can do extremely superhuman things already and then very, very not human things later. So I always try to think of it as an alien intelligence and not try to project my anthropomorphic biases onto it. The reason, though, that we make some of the interface choices we do, and there's some we don't make also, is that we believe in designing for a very human-compatible world.
Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second, and this is actually the same reason why humanoid robots are proliferating at the rate that they are, humanoid design robots. A lot of people ask, well, can't you design robots that are more specific to a task that would probably look a lot different? Well, the entire world is designed for humans. And so when you're designing a robot to work within the world, the human world, it makes it a lot easier for that robot to go anywhere and to help with a lot more tasks if it is able to operate with all of the existing features of the world, which again are designed for humans.
The fact that these systems operate in natural language, that seems really important to us for a bunch of reasons. It seems like there's also a lot of nice safety properties around that you can imagine down the road, but it seems like a very important goal to make the AIs be maximally human compatible and designed for humans and work in a way where they're communicating with us in language, maybe with each other in language. There's other versions of this. I sort of think the world should prefer humanoid robots to other, shapes or structures of robots.
Yep. All right. Well, there he goes. Said what I just said.
So I think easy to use for humans, which includes language as sort of maybe a primary interface method, but not trying to project too much human likeness onto them beyond that. So we didn't give our AI a human name. I think ChatGPT, although extremely cumbersome as a name, done it differently, has the nice property of a word that kind of explains what it is, and then 3 letters that sound like a robot, but it's kind of very clear it's not.
I never thought about that. So you have Siri and Alexa and all of these other quote unquote AIs, which obviously are not even close to as capable as ChatGPT. But then you have ChatGPT, which is, that is not a name. That is not a human name. They're not giving it that human feature of having a human name. And I wonder if that trend is going to go more towards having AI with human names or less so. Gemini, not a human name. Mistral, Llama, all of these model names are not human names. Maybe when they're wrapped in some kind of AI assistant, they will have a human name. In the movie Her, it's a human name. So it's an interesting thing to think about, something I haven't thought much about.
What about doing more in that direction? What about, for example, saying that ChatGPT can never use I?
This gets to the point of human compatibility. We have played around with versions like that. Tends to frustrate users more than it helps. We're used to some idioms when we're interacting in language.
Or what about with your voice? When you have a voice model, like having a beep or something before that signifies this is not a person. I mean, we're about to enter this period of elections. Everybody here is concerned about deepfakes, misinformation. How do you verify what is real? What can you do to make it at the core design level so that's less of a problem?
Yeah, I think there are interesting audio cues like a beep. What people definitely don't want is a robot sounding language. This gets to the kind of human compatibility point and the way we're wired. I will say, having used voice mode, which I love much more than I expected to, it really crossed some threshold for me all at once. I was never like the guy using voice mode on my phone for anything else before this one. There is incredible value, much more than I personally realized, to what feels like a very natural voice interface. And I don't think it would work the same way for me or kind of be the same level of naturalness and fluidity if it didn't sound like something that I was already like wired to. But a beep, some other indication, that could all make sense. I think we've just got to study how users respond to this. We'll launch it reasonably soon. I'm heartened on the whole by the reaction that users had to ChatGPT, where very quickly people understood A, that it was an AI, B, what the limitations were, when to use it and not use it, and C, kind of just how to integrate it, but that it was a new thing. I'm hopeful that things like voice mode will follow a very similar trajectory, but we will have a very tight feedback loop and watch it very carefully.
Well, I'm hopeful that the real-time translation works because I'm here in Switzerland and I was running in the mountains and this guy yells something at me in French. And because I'm pretending to be improving my French, I pretended to understand him. But I clearly didn't because what I was doing was heading into like a dangerous zone where I almost fell off a cliff. So once we can fix this, I'll be much better.
It's super good for that.
Let's talk about the Scarlett Johansson episode because there's something about it I don't understand. So you demonstrate these voices. She then puts out a statement which gets a lot of attention. Everybody here probably saw it, saying, they asked me if I could use my voice. I said no. They came back 2 days before the product was released. I said no again. They released it anyway. OpenAI then put out a statement saying, not quite right. We had a whole bunch of actors come in and audition. We selected 5 voices. After that, we asked her whether she would be part of it. She would have been the 6th voice. What I don't get about that is that one of the 5 voices sounds just like Scarlett Johansson. So it sounds almost like you are asking there to be 6 voices, 2 of which sound just like her. And I'm curious if you can explain that to me.
Yeah, it's not her voice. It's not supposed to be. I'm sorry for the confusion. Clearly, you think it is. But people are going to have different opinions about how much voices sound alike. But it's not her voice. And yeah, we don't think it. Not sure what else to say.
Oh, yeah, he's scared of a lawsuit for sure. I don't think it sounds exactly like Scarlett Johansson. And even if it does, you can hire a voice actor, voice actress, to sound just like Scarlett Johansson without it being her. That is completely legal. That is why some directors in movies say, if they can't afford Scarlett Johansson, get me a Scarlett Johansson type, somebody that looks like her, that is the same age as her, the same size as her. And so that's completely legal. This is completely legal. Now, all they need to do is put out the proof of the voice actress who actually voiced the voice that sounds like Scarlett Johansson, and then they'd be in the clear. But I don't think they've done that yet for some reason. So maybe they have trained it on her voice, but I don't think so.
Let's talk about authenticity, because that's pretty related. So I asked GPT-4o how, when you're interviewing someone on a video screen, to prove that they're real. And it suggested asking them about something that has happened in the last couple of hours and seeing if they can answer it. So what just happened to Magnus Carlsen?
I don't know.
All right. Well, I got a couple. We'll get one. What tech companies' earnings are the subject of Twitter right now?
Or the cloud. Salesforce.
Boom. All right. It also said you could ask the person to do a complicated physical movement, like can you raise your right hand while touching your nose with your left hand? All right. man is real. All right, let's talk a little bit about the globalization of AI, since that's something that's come up a lot during this conference. Clearly, it's in your interest for there to be one or few large language models. But where do you see the world going? Do you think that 3 years from now there will be many base large language models or very few? And importantly, will there be a separate large language model that is used in China, one that's used differently in Nigeria, one that's used differently in India? Where are we going?
Honestly, we nor anyone else know the answer to that question. There are clearly tons of models being trained there, and that will continue. And although we don't know, I would expect that China will have their own large language model that's different from the rest of the world. I would guess that there will be there will be like thousands of large language models trained. I would guess that there would be a small number, 10, 20, something like that get a lot of the usage and that are trained with the most resources. But I think we're still so early in this world, and there's so much left to discover and so many scientific breakthroughs still to happen, that any confident predictions here are really hard.
So that's a little surprising to me, because it seems much more obvious that, yeah, of course, there's going to be different models depending on which country, even within a country, what's the language, what are the cultural norms. I mean, there's a reason that there's essentially different internets for a lot of different countries. China has a very different internet than the US has, and there's a reason for that, because their cultural norms are different from ours. So the fact that he's not sure, kind of surprising to me, because it seems so very obvious to me.
So one of the things that I'm most concerned about as we head to the next iteration of AI is that the web becomes almost incomprehensible, where there's so much content being put up because it's so easy to create web pages, it's so easy to create stories, it's so easy to do everything, that the web almost becomes impossible to navigate and get through. Do you worry about this? And if you think it's a real possibility, what can be done to make it less likely?
I think the way we use the internet is likely to somewhat change, although that's going to take a long time. But I don't worry about it becoming incomprehensible. I think you already see a little bit with the way someone uses ChatGPT, where you can sometimes get information more effectively than going around to search for something and click around. And this idea that the internet can sort of be brought to you, I think is a cool thing about where AI is going.
So Jan LeCun did an interview with Lex Friedman. I covered it a couple months ago, and he said something really interesting. It's basically going to be, my AI agent is going to be my access to the internet, and it's going to filter everything. It's going to bring the internet to me, which Sam Altman just said. And I think that is probably the likely outcome for what is the future of the internet. There's going to be so much bad information, bad content, just a proliferation of crap on the internet, and a lot of scams, a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and my AI needs to sort through it for me and bring me what's most relevant to me.
And so I think there could be changes to how we all use the internet like that, but I don't worry about it becoming incomprehensible, covered with spam generated articles or anything.
I mean, in a way, listening to hear it say that, I see a world where the internet almost collapses, where it is just these 10 or 20 large language models that are your interface. Is that more of what you see?
I can imagine versions where the whole web gets made into components, and you have this AI that is putting together, this is a way in the future, putting together the perfect web page for you every time you need something, and everything is live rendered for you instantly.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's something I've been thinking a lot about. In fact, just today I published a video about just-in-time code, and I think there's really something there, that everything is going to be rendered for you in real time. Not just the internet, not just the actual websites, the HTML, but your video, your audio, your pictures. Everything is going to be generated when you need it, and it's going to be exactly what you need to an audience of one.
But I can't imagine that everything just gets to one website. That feels against all instincts I'd have.
Okay, let's talk about, to me, since November of last year, I've kept this list of questions where very smart people in AI disagree. And to me, one of the most interesting is whether it will make income inequality worse or whether it will make income inequality better. And I feel I've listened to lots and lots of your podcasts, and it's come up a couple times. And you talk in some ways about actually potentially making income inequality worse and the need for universal basic income to counter that. But this morning on this stage, Azim Azar was here, and he was citing economic studies, and other people have cited them as well, that suggest that actually AI tools, when implemented in, say, a call center, help the lowest paid workers more than the highest paid workers. As AI has been rolled out, has this changed your view of what will happen with income inequality in the world, both within countries and across countries?
Let me give an example first. Today we launched OpenAI for nonprofits, which is a new initiative to make our tools more cheaper and more widely available for nonprofits. So there's like discounts, there's ways to share best practices, and people have been doing amazing work with this. One example is the International Rescue Committee using our tools and having like great results from that integration, supporting like overstretched teachers and learners in real crisis zones. And I think that is an example of where these tools, because you can automate something that has been difficult and make intelligence, however you want to call that, much more widely available, can really help people that need it more than it would help people in like already a rich context. So we're very excited to launch that program in general, and it's an example of what you're talking about, that you can see ways in which, lots of ways, doesn't take much imagination, that AI does more to help the poorest people than the richest people. And we really believe that. We're enthusiastic about it. It is a huge part of why we want to build these tools. And I think it's a huge part of like the history of technology and the arc of what's been happening. So that will happen for sure. I think technology does a great deal to lift the world to more abundance, to greater heights, to better prosperity, whatever you want to call it. And I'm optimistic for that. I don't think that'll require any special intervention. I still expect, although I don't know what, and this is over a long period of time. This is not a like next year or, the year after, that kind of thing. But over a long period of time, I still expect that there will be some change required to the social contract, given how powerful we expect this technology to be. I'm not a believer that there won't be any jobs. I think we always find new things to do. But I do think like the whole structure of society itself will, be up for some degree of debate and reconfiguration.
Wow. That is a huge statement. And of course, it kind of makes sense. When you have this completely transformational technology, something in this social contract is going to need to change. When everybody in the short and mid run become so much more productive and the productivity of the world increases, and then at a certain point, AI is able to accomplish everything that humans are, what are we going to do? And there's a lot of questions there. I really don't know what the future holds. I would love to know your thoughts, though. Let me know in the comments.
And that reconfiguration will be led by the large language model companies?
No. Just the way the whole economy works and what...
No big deal. No. Just the way the whole economy works. That was funny. All right. Next, they're going to talk about governance of OpenAI, which is a much discussed topic because of how convoluted it was and all the changes when Sam got fired and then brought back. So let's watch.
Let's talk about governance of OpenAI. So one of my favorite quotes, I can't read the whole thing because there's UN prohibitions, but this is from an interview you gave to The New Yorker 8 years ago, and when I worked there. And you were talking about governance of OpenAI, and you said, "We're planning a way to allow wide swaths of the world to elect representatives to a new governance board of the company, because if I weren't in on this, I'd be like, why do these effers get to decide what happens to me?" So tell me about that quote and your thoughts on it now.
Something like that is still what I believe would be good to do. We continue to talk about how to implement governance. I probably shouldn't say too much more right now, but I remain excited about something in that direction.
Yeah, didn't say anything. Not surprising.
Say a little bit more.
I will pass, I'm sorry.
All right. Well, let me ask you about the critique of governance now. So 2 of your former board members, Tasha McCauley, Helen Toner, just put out an op-ed in The Economist, and they said, after our disappointing experiences with OpenAI, These are the board members who voted to fire you before you came back or were reinstated as CEO. They said you can't trust self-governance at an AI company. And then earlier this week, Toner gave an interview with the TED AI podcast, which was quite tough. And she said that the oversight had been entirely dysfunctional, and in fact, that she had learned, and the board had learned about the release of ChatGPT from Twitter. Is that accurate?
Look, I respectfully, but very significantly disagree with her recollection of events. But I will say that I think this Toner is, she genuinely cares about a good AGI app.
Oh my God, he's so media trained. It's hard to listen to him sometimes because I just want him to give an answer, a straight answer, but he's so media trained, he's going to dance around it. I've already seen this clip and he's not going to give a straight answer, but let's watch it anyways.
And I appreciate that about her. I wish her well. Yeah, I probably don't want to get into like a line by line refutation here. When we released ChatGPT, it was, at the time called a low-key research preview. We did not expect what happened to happen, but we had, of course, talked a lot with our board about a kind of research plan that a release plan that we were moving towards. We had, at this point, had, 3.5, which ChatGPT was based on, available for, I think, about 8 months or something like that. We had long since finished training GPT-4, and we were figuring out a sort of gradual release plan to that. I disagree with her recollection of events.
Okay. That's where you're going to leave it?
I think so.
All right, so we talked about a lot of different topics today. I found this interview to be extremely interesting. Some new information is out there now. A lot of the really kind of juicy drama details he danced around, of course. Very well media trained. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.